Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode 124. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining me this week and every week. If you have not yet left a rating or a review on the podcast, I would be so grateful if you would do so. Just hit pause, take a moment to go into Apple or whatever podcast app you listen to and leave a rating. And even better would be to leave a review. Thank you so much for doing that. It is super helpful for me as well as to get the podcast into the hands of more people. All right, so today's episode is not just inspired from, but really a step-by-step answer to a question that was posed from a listener. So when I was on my podcast sabbatical, I had encouraged you guys to reach out to me and to let me know what you'd like me to cover. And that's what I am doing today. So there are a lot of different parts to this question, and I'm going to do my best to actually answer them all. And I think that you're going to learn a lot from it because you may have the same questions or wonder how management actually works. So I decided to really approach this episode, though, from the perspective of managing associates. That said, you might be an associate. You're still going to learn a lot from this, especially in terms of how others are trying to help you and support you. You may not always see it that way, but there really is a lot of thought that goes into it. Hopefully, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And if you're in-house or you are not an attorney, but you are in some other company or area, if you in any way manage or train those under you who are supporting your matters, your work, this is going to be beneficial. So the first part of the question was really this concept of managing up and down at the same time. So the question was really, if you are a practice group leader and you're reporting both to the managing partner or the executive committee, while you're also managing the attorneys below you, like how does that work? Because it seems really complicated to have to try to please clients, please partners, deal with associates, please them, please your, managing partner or the executive committee. You're just trying to please a lot of people. And so the question was, if you're wearing all of these multiple hats, I guess while it wasn't directly asked, it was implied. It was basically, where's your loyalty, right? Because there is a bit of a conflict there. And so how do you approach that? So the first thing that I want to say on that is it's really not that difficult unless you're a major people pleaser. Because if you are in a management role, there will always be someone who doesn't like you at any given point. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of people that disagree with you, but some people will be really angry with you and upset with you and not like the way that you did things. And if you really are trying to make everyone happy, you are going to be miserable. Okay. So and I don't think the question was asked, like, should I look for this type of management role? But I do think that's helpful information because a lot of times I think some attorneys do aspire to be in these management roles. And not that you should not be compassionate, not that you should not be empathetic, not that you should not be kind or respectful. Those are super important to being a good manager. But if you're trying to please everyone, you are going to have so much stress and anxiety because it simply is not possible, right? You have to be willing to be okay with not being liked. And I think that's really hard for some attorneys. And if you are thinking that you have some aspirations of being a manager or a leader, and you're like, oh, I think I am a people pleaser, but I still want to do this, then what I encourage you to do is really do some work around resilience. There are plenty of great resources out there, but The Power of Resilience is a really good book that might be a starting place for you. And it's not just about not being worried about what others think, but it's also being willing to get it wrong. Because one of the most important things as a manager or a leader is simply making decisions. And you can't spend all day trying to get the exact right answer. The company, the firm, it has to be moving forward. And, at least in law firms, managers are generally practicing attorneys who also have to build their books of business. So there's only so much time to actually commit to the management role. And so if you're so scared to make decisions because you're worried you're going to get it wrong, again, that's going to be a major, major problem. So it's learning really to trust your gut and being willing to make decisions, being willing to get it wrong, and being willing to admit your mistakes, but mostly just auto-correcting as you go. Knowing that there will be a lot of spears coming your way, perhaps in your back, perhaps coming straight at you, but you just have to know that it's really not about you. Like, it's just not about you. And a lot of times I think it's just easy for groups of humans to come together, right? In the sense that you're going to have factions. You are going to have people that are never happy. You're going to have people that complain a lot, but aren't willing to actually do the work to change it. And you just have to be ready for that and be okay with that and know that it's not actually you. It's just this concept that it's really easy to just blame management, because it's like management's not necessarily a person, to just blame management for things as opposed to dealing with your own stuff. So just putting that out there to begin with. That said, when you are dealing with a lot of different people, the key in my mind, and again, everyone's going to have different opinions on this, but the key in my mind to being successful is just being open to every single point of view. So there really is no loyalty to one party over another. I think that if you are a manager and your loyalty is 100% to the, executive committee, to the managing partner, whatever the higher managing body is, if that's where all of your loyalty is, you're going to have a really hard time managing those that are either beside you, which is kind of how law firms work with other partners, or below you, because people aren't going to trust you. Right? They're not going to trust that you have their best interests in mind or that you're listening to them. They're just going to assume that you are just there doing whatever management wants. And so in that sense, it's like, well, what's the point? So, and I know there are probably people that disagree on that, but I really think that when you are in that middle management position, you don't have loyalty to any one person. Right? It's the firm as a whole, because you're trying to help the firm as a whole. And that also means that your loyalty is not to, again, those beside you or below you, because then your management committee, your managing partner, they're not going to trust you. They're going to think that, you are just there for everyone else and you're not putting the firm first. Similarly, I don't think that your loyalty should always be to clients, because sometimes you have bad clients. And if they are always right, I know there's the concept of the customer is always right, but if the client is always right, then your firm is probably going to be it's going to have a very toxic culture. And you're always going to be at the whim of what a particular client is wanting or needing or saying. So in my mind, the key to being an effective manager really is just having an open mind, being willing to hear everyone out, being willing to understand everyone's perspective, and then just making the best decision that you know how in that moment. I'm also a firm believer in transparency. I think often when people distrust middle management or distrust, the larger management, which in many ways it's like this concept of God or Oz. They're out there somewhere, but you don't know who they are and how they're making decisions. When people don't trust you, it's often because they don't believe that the reasons that you are giving or the explanations that you are giving for a decision is true. They think it is all PR and it is all spin. And to some degree, I think a lot of managers do that. And I think they do it for a few different reasons. But one is to try to keep the peace. People don't want to say, here's why we're doing this, because it might really upset people. I'm of the belief that you actually should be direct. You should say exactly why you're doing what you're doing, because even if people disagree with you, they'll at least trust you. And I really think that is the most important attribute of a leader is trust. And to me, you build trust by being open and honest, even when it hurts. So one of the questions that the listener asked related to, if there was a staffing issue or something, related to an associate where you had to go, or a client issue where you had to go to the management committee or the managing partner. And so I just wanted to say on this, I get that like mid-sized firms or small firms are going to look different, but for large firms, that would be really rare. That's the entire purpose of having middle management. That's the entire purpose of having practice group leaders and section leaders. It's to handle those types of issues. So that is not going to go up the chain because, again, keep in mind that your directors, your managing committee. Now, in some instances, you might have one person where it's their full-time job just to manage the firm. But most of the people that are on that governance committee at the top, they have their own matters. They're building their own book of business, and they have the ongoing management, which is really high level stuff. So you just don't take them, the small stuff, even if it is a really big issue, because what's seen as a really big issue, there's a lot of that going on at any given time. And the highest levels of management, they just don't have time to get in the weeds on that stuff. And even if you have one person who is full-time and maybe they're not practicing anymore, there's still only so many hours in the day. And again, they're looking at really high level stuff. So you're generally not going to take those types of issues to them. If you have certain staffing issues, you're probably going to go to HR. If there's some type of employment issue where maybe you're going to have to let someone go, again, HR, but a lot of times law firms will have certain attorneys who are tapped with being, they have to review it before the decision is actually made. So there's generally protocols already set up where you know who to go to get that reviewed or approved. But for the most part, practice group leaders, section leaders, they are the front line. And they're also the ones that the management committee trusts to make those kinds of decisions. So, I think sometimes there's a belief that when you're doing reviews or other things, that when, your practice group leader or section leader is meeting with management, the management committee, that every single person is reviewed. And, I've not practiced in all firms, but I've worked with a lot and I kind of see what they do. And it's very similar to my experience, which is that's not common. A lot of the people on the management committee may never hear of an attorney's name, like it may never come up. And that may be really disheartening if you are an associate to know that you're just a number or a stat on a spreadsheet. But again, that's not often what's being discussed in those rooms. It's what resources do you need? It's what's going on? What do you want us to know about? What new matters are coming in? Hey, we're noticing that your numbers are really down, either from a utilization perspective or collections. And what is that about? If names are being discussed, it's often partners, not associates, which is one of the reasons why if you are an associate, you don't need to rely upon your good work to get you where you want to go. You need to go be building these relationships and connecting with the management committee and those at the very top if you really want to be known. And by the way, you do want to be known. When your name comes up for partner, you don't want it to be the very first time that someone's heard your name and they're like, now who is that? What do they do? So that's on you. Okay. That's your practice leader's not going to do that. There are not meetings about you with the higher management committee. And so client issues is similar. Depending on how big the client is, how big the issue is there a malpractice claim that's potentially going to be at issue? That's really just for the practice group leaders, section leaders, partners to come up with a solution on their own. You Again, depending on what the issue is, you might get your CFO or your COO involved, but you're probably not going to go to the higher management committee or the managing partner unless there is something, again, like you're about to lose a huge client that is very important to the firm, or there might be a malpractice claim. Like that's just not elevated to that level. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, when partners have spats, or there are disagreements on credit or anything like that, when it gets up to the managing committee, it doesn't look good for anyone involved. I assume it's kind of like the concept of, children on the playground, right? It's the no one likes a tattletale. It's even like with judges, right? You can be 100% in the right, and there could be a bully on the other end. And yet, teachers, judges, managing partners, they still don't want to hear it. They assume that if you can't work it out, it's, all of your problems. And that can be really frustrating. In every single one of those instances, it's like, why can the judge not see that I'm being reasonable? Or, why can the teacher not see that this kid is being a bully? Why can't the managing partner see that this other partner is a complete jackwagon? I don't know the answer to that, but sometimes it very much can feel like you are managing a lot of kids and you don't always know every aspect, and it's never as clear cut as you think. And, management makes bad decisions sometimes, but I do generally think people are doing the best that they can. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of unconscious bias involved, and I think there's a lot of, loyalty to either people who have been at firms for a really long time or to those with the largest books of business. And again, doesn't make it right, but it's what it is. And so just knowing the lay of the land, I think, can give you a heads up in when to try to push back and go to management and when to just let things go because it doesn't really help you to be angry all the time, or to go find another firm where you think you would be a better fit. And again, I hear all the time, all firms are the same. If I'm ever going to leave a firm, I'm just going to go in-house. I would never go to another firm. That simply is not true. And by the way, I used to say the exact same thing, so I get it. It was when I then started working with a ton of different firms that I saw just how different they can be. So if you're probably not a good fit at your firm and you're constantly upset with either your middle management or your higher management, I really encourage you to go back and listen to episode number 32. Not all firms are created equal. Okay, moving down the list of questions. So the next one is, how do you train associates, especially when they make mistakes or a client isn't happy with their work? How do you give them feedback? So this is really different than what a middle manager would be doing. Okay. So when you're managing a group, you're not really managing the work product. Same concept as the higher management. So it's interesting when you're in the position of like a practice group leader or a section leader, because there are associates you're going to work with one-on-one on your matters. And in that sense, you absolutely need to be training and mentoring them on how to be good lawyers. But for the associates that you don't work with, you're looking at something very different. You might look at their numbers. And so it's really about asking questions. So you might wonder, well, why are their numbers so low? Why are they not working as much? Or if you are hearing from partners that they're really disappointed with what an associate is doing, or you get their evaluations and it's not that great. Your job really there is then to go talk to the partners that have worked with that associate. In that sense, they're kind of middle management. And so you go try to figure out what's going on, and you try to figure out what that partner is doing to help train them. And then you go talk to the associate to try to get their perspective. And it's trying to get them the resources they need and letting them know they need to improve. But a whole lot of it is just coaching the partners to have direct conversations with the associates. So the training and mentoring really is only if you are working directly with someone that's on your matters. And again, I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way. It's interesting. I think I did a much better job training associates on my matters in the law firm than I do with my team now, because part of it is, you're really training them to step in your shoes. And as associates, it's training them to think the way you think so that they can serve the client, not just in a general aspect, but to truly serve them in the same way you would serve them. And I think that requires a ton of work. And I know that one of the things that I used to always do was after every project, whether it was, whether we were doing letters or it was a motion or discovery, whatever it was, even a hearing, I would always try to set aside time afterwards to go over that, to say, here's what went well, or here's really where you could improve. Or if I took something and completely rewrote it, trying to explain why I did that. Because I think a lot of associates are just kind of out there wondering, like they don't know. In their minds, there's like no rhyme or reason for why you're completely redoing their work. Or they know they're struggling. They know you're not giving them work, but they don't know why. And I think if you're a really good partner and really want to train your associates, you have to build in that ongoing, don't wait until the evaluation. Don't wait until the review. It has to be an ongoing training process. And it's generally from giving them feedback as to a very particular project. And I had many associates who would tell me, you're the only person that does this. None of the other partners are doing this with me. And so if you're a partner and this is like news to you because maybe no one did that with you when you were an associate, that's the best way to train someone, not just on the work product, but in dealing with clients and explaining, what happens. It would be wonderful if you could train on the front end. We just don't have that much time, which is why often you have to have associates make mistakes and then you clean them up and fix them and then explain what they could have done differently and how you think through it. And we're busy. We're super, super busy. But if you really want help and support, and if you truly believe in and want to invest in the associates working for you, you just have to build in that time. And by the way, if you are an associate and you're like, yeah, no one is giving me that kind of feedback, then you've got to take matters into your own hands. Run red lines, look at the differences, try to figure out what it is, have an idea as to what it was, and then ask the partner if you can get some of their time to meet with them to go over it. And if they say no, there's not much you can do about that. And that's really frustrating, but they might say yes. The key is to go in prepared. Don't assume that they're going to know how to do this. Go in and say, okay, I've read a red line and I know a lot changed and I just want to learn from it so that I can be better prepared next time so that you don't have to do as much next time. So I have tried to put together my ideas as to what I think the issue was. So I want to share that first, but then I would love your feedback. If you go in prepared and show that you're not just, wanting all of their time and they have to explain everything to you, they're going to want to invest in you in a totally different way than if they're just wanting you, again, to explain everything. And I know that is a common complaint made about the younger attorneys and the millennials is that they just want everything explained. They want opportunities, and yet they don't ever really want to do the hard work on the front end. And sometimes millennials are like, I don't know what you're talking about. I think that's what they're talking about. They want you to show up having already done some of the work and already trying to think through what the issue is. And then that makes them see that it's a two-way street and that you're not just asking for everything from them. So hopefully that helps. Related to that, another was a question of how do you help associates that make mistakes? Well, first off, people are going to make mistakes, right? We're humans. We make mistakes, especially when you're trying to learn something. And I think the key to that is to have a culture where it is okay to make mistakes. When you have cultures, either whether it's the firm or with a particular partner, where when you make a mistake, you're going to get yelled at, screamed at, get written up with crazy, mean things on an evaluation. People hold grudges, never work with you again. When you make a mistake, you're going to try to cover it up. Okay. So the best way you can train associates is to let them know early and often that they are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. It's part of the learning process, and it never feels good for them or for you or anyone else involved. But the worst thing that they can do is to try to hide it. And the best thing that they can do is bring it to you as soon as they catch it, and know that there may still be difficulty around it. There may still be hard conversations around it, but it's from a place of just dealing with the reality and wanting to help them improve. And that kind of is the same concept as transparency and trust. If you say that, you have to follow through. Right? You can't hold that grudge. You can't yell and scream. You can let them know how upset you are and how disappointed you are, And then maybe afterwards share how you made your own mistake as an associate that was just as bad, right? Because you don't want them to think that it's not a big deal, but they need to understand that you're there for them. And so that really is just, in my mind, it is having a culture where mistakes are allowed and knowing that there are people on the team that have your back and everything is solvable. And I think that is so important in this day and age when we know that suicide rates, depression rates, addiction rates are so high for attorneys. It is high pressure. And there should never be a reason why an attorney ever feels like there are no options or that they have made such a huge mistake that they can never go back. And again, I think we can all do a lot as partners and as firms to create cultures where mistakes are allowed. And we're there to support and help. And then the last question relates to, let's say a client is upset with an associate and you know that maybe it's not completely the associate's fault, right? So maybe, a case just took a really bad turn, or even though it looked like it wasn't what a client would want, it didn't really have an impact. How do you deal with that? Again, just my opinion, but I think that you have to always just be direct and honest. If you have clients that throw temper tantrums, if you have clients that are not willing to listen to you and have an open and frank conversation around staffing or anything else, that tells me that they are a difficult client, period, and they're not going to listen to you or have an open conversation around strategy or anything else. And that's what, one, can suck the life out of, you being a lawyer. It sucks. And two, it can get you into really, tricky situations where, sometimes you're dancing ethical lines. So again, I just think that transparency and honesty is the best approach to this. And so if you genuinely don't think that it was the associate's fault, it's kind of like being that middle manager where I think you just really want to listen to the client's perspective, reiterate that you understand what they're saying, and then share your perspective, which is, I hear what you're saying, and I think they could have done it differently as well, but it did not have an impact. So I would like for us to discuss how we can rebuild the trust moving forward, because I think this associate really does a great job. And this is not typical of the way that they do work. And there's a lot of value for you as a client to have the same team in place as we move forward. That said, let's say there really is a personality mismatch. You might just respect that, and you can let the associate know that, right? You can say, look, this is just, it's not a good personality fit. And the more we go along, it's just not going to work. So I'm actually doing everyone a favor by readjusting the way that we're going to staff this. I know I worked with a particular bookkeeper once, and the person that I was assigned to train to work on my account, I knew within the first 5 minutes we were not going to get along. And I actually raised it and asked if I could be reassigned to someone else because I just knew. And, they were like, no. And so I listened to them, right? And, it did not turn out well. It got really ugly, actually. So sometimes you do want to listen to these things, right? So again, it goes back to, you can never have loyalty to one or the other. It can't be that your loyalty is always to the client. It can't be that your loyalty is always to the associate. It's that you need to be open and listen and really try to make the best decision based on your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience in the situation, and just trusting that you're doing the best you can. And if you have clients who can't handle that or associates who can't handle that, they're probably not the best fit to begin with. And if they leave, it just opens up the door. It opens up space for a better fit to come along. Okay, that's it. That's it for today. That was a lot. Hopefully I answered all of your questions. For those of you listening, if you have a question, if you have a topic or an issue that you would love to hear me address on a podcast episode, all you have to do is email support@heatherjoyhubbard.com. And when I sit down to do podcasts, I review everything that's coming in, and your topic may be the next one that I address. So feel free to submit those. I love to receive them, and I love to answer your questions. So you know who you are, who submitted the question. Thank you so much for submitting it. I hope that was helpful. I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll talk soon. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, And to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.